Thank you. No, well, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today about Net Zero NHS. I'm Pete Waddingham. I'm the National Net Zero Lead for the Health Innovation Network. We were formerly called the Academic Health Science Network, but we're now the Health Innovation Network. And just in terms of what I'd like to do today is four things really. I want to briefly explain the role of the Health Innovation Network in case you're not familiar with who we are or what we do. I just want to talk briefly about some of the support that we give to SMEs on net zero, and I'm going to talk you through our innovator support resource that we've just launched recently. I'll give a couple of examples of just some recent work that we're involved in, and then I want to finally finish on reflections and just some key actions based today. I know you've got some of my colleagues come along to speak today and to do some presentations after me, so I'll make sure that I don't cover too much of their content and let them go into a bit more detail. So just in terms of the Health Innovation Network, who we are, there are 15 health innovation organisations up and down England. I've been with the Health Innovation Network for the last 6 years. I was previously working for the Yorkshire and Humber, and I'm now still hosted by them, but I work at a national level on net zero. So we're all geographically tied to our system partners, our integrated care boards, and we've got really good relationships locally with our trust, but we also come together to work as a network of networks, and net zero is one of those topics. So we've got a really good community across the network where we come and share our knowledge on net zero, which hopefully today you'll appreciate just how an important a topic it is for the NHS. In terms of our website, some of the resources that I'll talk about today are on our website. We've got a landing page for environmental sustainability, so yeah, please do check out the wider website. It tells you a little bit about who we are, and we try and help find and spread innovation amongst the NHS. And we've got lots of priority areas, and as I say, environmental sustainability stroke net zero is one of many, but we're involved in everything from cardiovascular disease to patient safety to medicines and prescribing, and lots of work as well on digital and AI as well. So do check us out as an entity. And as I said, we've got some useful resources on the website, and one of which that I want to talk about today is our newly released Net Zero Innovator Support Guide. And I'll take you through the live link on that because it's a bit dynamic, so it looks a little bit better than a presentation. So I will just open that up now and allow you to see that. So here is our support guide. A little introduction from Professor Gary Ford, who was previously the chair of the Academic Health Science Network until recently, but it's great to have that senior leadership and buy-in for this important agenda, and we need everything right from the top, and everyone working towards this common goal of achieving net zero. So really important to have that senior leadership buy-in, and I would encourage you as organisations to just test that assumption within your own organisation. And again, we'll touch on this in a second with some of the information that's in this support resource, but leadership is fundamental if we're going to achieve net zero. I just wanted to touch a little bit in terms of just what this pack's covering. I'm not going to go into all of it today, just because of time, but there are some key areas. So we will talk about an introduction to net zero and climate change. I am going to just spend sort of a few seconds on that. We'll give you an overview of what the NHS is looking for in terms of its roadmap and procurement. And then just some brief kind of information about where to begin as an innovator, because it is quite a complex area as net zero. You know, there's a lot to get your head around as a business, and hopefully we can help with that. I'll probably just say this now, and I will conclude at the end, but we do ask people not to struggle alone with this. This innovator support pack is almost like you know, an entry to what people need to know, but please bear in mind that behind this pack are a range of colleagues, myself included, that can help you navigate this landscape and make sure that you know, that you're supported and understand, as I'm sure that the support that you get from other industries and other colleagues that you work with. I mean, just in terms of net zero and climate change, and this is a nice quote that we've included, but we are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. And I'll just encourage you all as individuals and as businesses to reflect on what does the climate emergency mean to you as a business, or even in your personal settings. The reason why I think that's important is because it really does help, I think, hammer home why we need to act quite quickly with this. If I think about a local example myself, I'm a flood warden in the area that I live, and actually my home is at risk of flooding, and that risk continues to increase year by year as the planet gets hotter and the climate changes. Now, if I'm a business as well, you know, what impact might that have? What impact might the temperature increase in the summers do to me as a business and my supply chain? What might things like flood risk increase due to me as a business and how I deliver services? So please just you know, start reflecting. This isn't a lecture about climate change, but it's absolutely essential that we all continue to take time to absorb ourselves in this topic. And yeah, well, our pack just includes a little bit more about that. It also just establishes a bit of a definition around net zero. I mean, I won't touch on all of this, but very crudely, you know, we know that we can't eliminate all of the emissions that we have as businesses. So actually, we will need to offset them and to use things like nature-based solutions to take out that carbon out of the atmosphere. So yeah, you know, climate change, net zero, try to make sure that you as a business understand those concepts and reflect on them in terms of what it means for you, as I said, as a business and personally. In terms of the NHS, I mean, it's really good. You know, the NHS is the first health system in the world to have built net zero into legislation. And that phrase here you might have seen before, but the climate emergency is a health emergency. I mean, sadly, we have to pick up the tab, and the NHS has to pick up the tab for that you know, increase and change in climate, whether that be, as I said, the extreme summers that we've just recently faced again, and the elderly and the vulnerable groups in our societies that have to, you know, that feel the effects of that, or even things like I said, flooding and the mental health burden that goes with people, you know, when their homes or their businesses have been affected by flooding. So, and lots of it in between. There's so many areas that the climate change will have an impact on health, and I can't obviously do all of that justice today in this short presentation. In terms of the NHS, as I said, it is the world's first health service to commit to net zero, and it's got 2 targets. And again, it's really useful to understand that as an SME that might be looking to support the NHS. But it wants to get to net zero for the emissions that it directly controls by 2040. But actually, it's this second bit that's really pertinent to this conversation today. The NHS's footprint, actually, the big proportion of its footprint, in fact, the largest part of its carbon footprint is in its supply chain. So it's absolutely essential, if we're going to help the NHS, that we must help the supply chain decarbonise so that it can achieve its targets. Thankfully, as I said, because it's in legislation as well, there's some great kind of policy documents that exist and have come out on the back of that legislation. Every ICB and trust up and down England has to create a green plan. There's some guidance about how to do that. The reason we've included that in here in this pack is because it helps you identify what the areas, the priority areas are for the NHS. And obviously these plans are transparent, they're on the websites of our trusts, and that again helps you as a business be able to show how does your innovation, how does your product, your service help the NHS with its green plan. So it's really useful sometimes to see a copy of these and just to think about how you can strategically tie your offering into what the NHS is looking for. Again, I'm not going to go through all these areas, but these are just the priorities for the Greener NHS team. Models of care obviously will be very, very relevant to people listening today, as will, I'm sure, medicines. And as I said, you are the supply chain, and that accounts for 62% of the NHS's footprint. So again, be familiar with these areas, think about how your contribution fits into these areas, and show that alignment with Greener NHS strategies. In terms of procurement, as I say, I'm probably not going to touch on all of this because I don't want to repeat some information that you'll be getting shared, I'm sure, by Heidi Barnard at NHS Supply Chain. But there is a roadmap for the NHS. Actually, it has just slightly tweaked recently, but I'm going to stick with this slide because it's still all very relevant. And essentially the key messages on here are that, you know, the NHS absolutely needs its suppliers to have carbon reduction plans in place. And I know Amanda's going to talk you through how to go about doing that. But it's absolutely like a fundamental first step. The other part of the roadmap as well is around getting carbon footprints for individual products. So according to this roadmap, that's, you know, down the line, April 2028. But often we say to the innovators that we're working with, you know, why wait until then, really? You know, even though that roadmap is set out for getting everyone on board, there's absolutely a reason and a need to bring that forward if you as a business can do that. You know, I think that's a good move on a few fronts, and again I'll touch on why in a second. Again, I won't touch on this because I know Heidi is going to talk about the supplier Evergreen, the Evergreen Sustainable Supplier Assessment. But again, it's just another example of a really useful framework that suppliers can hang their green credentials on. So I'll whip through that session there. This I just want to touch on really quickly as well. There are some wider responsible sustainability considerations, and social value is often talked about hand in glove with net zero. And the reason being is that the 5 social value themes that the NHS uses to categorize social value includes fighting climate change. So you can see them there. So they're the themes that the NHS have currently defined as social values. So it's important that we try and get you as businesses to understand, what does social value mean, and what does social value mean in the context of the NHS. And as I said, we've got kind of lots of wraparound support behind this pack as well to help you navigate that. But, you know, please do start thinking about your social value contribution. As I said, net zero is one of those areas. We've also just included this in there around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The reason, again, we've put this in the pack is because you know, it's a really good framework. Obviously, because it's a UN designed framework, it goes across the globe with governments and big industries aligning to these areas. And you know, we often talk about net zero, but there are some wider sustainability goals, things like looking after our fresh water, and things, you know, our air quality, our air pollution. So, you know, that's a nice framework as well for you as businesses to think about. Where can you hang your hat on the things that you are doing in terms of other wider sustainable development goals? So where to begin as an innovator? As I said, it's a little bit complicated, net zero, but we've kind of put some reasons for you to do this and to look at this. And you know, improved resilience, that one in the middle there often comes up, but actually we need a resilient supply chain. You know, there's a lot of geopolitical events that have happened in the past, and I'm sure will continue to happen in the future. And even things like materials, precious metals, they are getting scarcer. They're getting, you know, they're increasing in cost. So, you know, as a business, if you start putting net zero thinking at the heart of your strategy, then there are competitive advantages, you know, financial savings. There's reputation and brand reasons, etc. So we're just really trying to actively encourage people to, as I said, put that net zero thinking at the heart of their business. We've put some basic steps as well. I'm not going to go through all this because obviously I can share this resource with you and it's there for you to look at. But we've included sort of a 3-step process just to start thinking about what do you need to do as a business. As I said, it's understanding the basics. Always start with the basics, understand what the NHS is after and the roadmap, and then you can build on that. You know, if we get the basics right, then we can build on all of the other areas that we need you to look at and we think they're good for business. As I said, one of the major steps is development of a carbon reduction plan, and even thinking about life cycle analysis of your products and services. And the good thing is there's lots of guidance, there's lots of support companies that we work with that can help people on that journey. And there's lots of things that you can do in-house, but also when you need some external support, you know, we've built up some relationships with companies that can help with that thinking as well. And then the final step, once you've kind of understood the basics, understand what the NHS wants, you've started developing and understanding your baseline and your emissions, then actually we're getting into the realms of developing a strategy for your business. Again, as I said, hopefully that strategy isn't just seen as an additional piece of work or another thing to have to do, because actually we strongly believe that, as I said, putting net zero at the heart can actually help you as a business as well. Lots of areas that you can think about to reduce your sustainability. We've got an environmental impact assessment that we've also built that we can help people navigate, just to kind of think about what impact and where can you apply some innovation within your areas of business or your product or service that you're offering to the NHS. Lots of potential scope. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and just quickly go back to my presentation just to wrap up really quickly. So yeah, as I said, it's on our website, that Innovator Guide, but please do remember that behind that pack are support staff that can help, and we do help SMEs who are currently accessing the NHS and want to supply to the NHS with their journey. I just wanted to quickly finish on a couple of examples. We've got a YouTube playlist actually, and we've got 2 playlists to do with net zero. One's our Green Hospital session that we ran. It's got 12 videos on there. We showcased over 50 innovators that are currently helping the NHS across 4 themes: travel and transport, models of care, consumables, and estates. We also have got a supporting a net zero NHS playlist with lots of sessions that we've run previously on topics like carbon accounting. As I said, it's fundamentally important, one of the basic steps, and we will continue to build that portfolio of resources to help showcase the work that people are doing, but obviously to help guide you as well. I'm just going to finish on a couple of things, and again, I wanted to sort of make that point that there are people behind the scenes helping. This is a big agenda. I was recently part of the Design for Life circular economy workshop that comes out of the medical technology strategy. So it's starting to look at how can we develop a roadmap to get more circularity into our medtech industry. That work is happening as we speak. It's developing. Obviously we're here to try and make sure that we can guide people working within medtech that they can adhere to new roadmaps, new strategy documents that come out from the government. So as I said, lots of work always happening. It's quite a fast-paced environment, is net zero, with lots of changes, and obviously rightly so, because it is such a big agenda. So just some final reflections from myself. As I said, I think it's really important that you understand climate change, but particularly obviously the impact to your business. And as I said, are there any risks? So if you've not started thinking about climate change, if you don't understand, please do take your time to absorb yourself in that. And as I said, there's lots of resources out there, and we can help guide you to some of those as well. Get familiar with the net zero requirements from the NHS. As I said, there's been a recent sort of tweet to that, but it's more or less business as usual. And that really, for me, the key message and what you're going to be speaking about, I'll get in the presentation on shortly, is creating a carbon reduction plan. It's absolutely fundamental, and it will help you identify the areas that you can focus on in business. And even though it might be quite complicated, please just start. Look at where areas that you're spending money on, the energy that you're using in your operations, etc. Just start to look at the carbon intensity of your operation. Skills and competencies is massively important. Again, we've been doing some thinking around there, but it's important to upskill your workforce, and that can be everything from just the basic competencies right through to some technical skills and knowledge, and everything in between. So again, if you're looking for some support in that area, please do reach out. And finally, I just wanted to finish on recognize that this is quite a huge and complex agenda, so please don't struggle alone. There's plenty of help out there. Ask for help, and please do connect with us if you need any support. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your time and allowing me to speak today.